Press got it. And then as soon as it starts, close that window, because then otherwise you'll hear the sound and it'll be an echo. Okay, now you can close it. And now press record. That's it, nothing else to do, except maybe close the participants tab. Oh yeah, you can do that too. Where from here? Press this way, press that. Yeah, we're ready. Yeah, it's right here. Where's, you have to go to gallery, see? Ready? Attention. Married. Good morning, everybody, once again. We want to start our talk on the discourse of the Adittapariyaya, on the simile of fire, or method of fire. Before I go to the Sutta straight away, I like to bring your attention to something else. That is, when you practice metta, in the Metta-Nisansa Sutta, you hear 11 benefits of practicing metta. One of them is that metta practitioners are not affected by fire, poison, and weapon. Metta practitioners will not be affected by fire, poison, and weapon. Do you think it is true? Suppose you are totally immersed in metta practice. Somebody comes behind and at very close range shoot. Doesn't the bullet go through your body or head? It definitely goes through. There is very famous story of Samavati, King Udayana's queen. He had two queens. Samavati was chief. There was another one called Magandhya. Buddha declared Samavati in Etadaggapali in Anguttara Nikaya, Edadaggambeke mama gihi upasikana metta vihari nang yadidang Samavati. Monks, among metta meditating lay women, Samavati is number one. And Samavati not only practicing metta, she had a metta retreat every week for 500 women. And one day there was Magandhya also was king's second concubine. She had a grudge against the Buddha because when she was proposed to the Buddha to marry, Buddha said, Disvana kamang aratin ratincha nahosi kamang api me tunasmi kime midang mutta karisa punnang padapi nang pusitum naiche. When seeing Tanna Rati Raga, I didn't have a scruple of lust. How much less desire can I have by seeing this woman full of urine and excrement? I even don't like to touch her with my foot. That was such a great insult to Magandhi, beautiful girl. She conceived grudge against the Buddha and wanted to take revenge. But since the Buddha was so great, so noble, so holy and supremely enlightened, nobody could hurt the Buddha. So eventually, for some reason, she married King Udena. And now Udena has two wives, Samavati and Magandhya. Magandhya tried to kill Samavati in many ways to take revenge of the Buddha. One day, of course, all her attempts were failed. Then she decided to take revenge or hurt Samavati, to hurt the Buddha. So when she was having this retreat of Metta retreat with 500 women, Magandhya got her uncles and other relatives, got all the clothes in their closets, covered the whole building with clothes, poured water into the clothes and set fire. Every woman, including Samavati, was killed in that fire while they were practicing metta. So while practicing metta, they died in the fire. So according to Metta Nisansa Sutta, when somebody practices metta, fire doesn't affect the person. That's what we hear. So does the Buddha say something untrue? Buddha never tells something not true. What the Buddha said was 100% true. The fire that burns our body is outside. The fire that does not affect us when we practice metta is inside. In this discourse, we talk about that inside fire. So we must remember, inside fire will not affect us when we practice metta. Now let me go to the discourse and then you see our inner fire. This is according to our tradition, the third discourse that Buddha delivered. According to Burmese tradition, this is the fourth discourse. Before he delivered Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, Next, Adittapariyaya Sutta, and it is said that there was another sutta called Hemavata Sutta, taught to Hemavata and Satagiri, two yakas. And this is the fourth discourse that is called Adittapariyaya Sutta. And this discourse, just like the one I mentioned yesterday, doesn't start with Evang Me Sutang. This discourse started, you can see in the book, Tatra Sudang Bhagava. Gaya yang virati, Gaya Sise. When Buddha was living in Gaya, Sisa, he met Gaya Kassapa, Uruvela Kassapa, Gaya Kassapa, and Nadi Kassapa. Uruvela Kassapa had 500 disciples. Gaya Kassapa has 300 disciples. Nadi Kassapa has 200 disciples. Altogether 1,000 disciples. Buddha performed such a miracle that they all were converted into Buddha's teaching and became Buddha's disciples. And then there already were 1,000 disciples. For them, after that, Buddha delivered this sermon. Because all these disciples were fire worshippers. And therefore Buddha decided to teach them a discourse about the fire, explaining how the 6 senses were on fire and burning with greed, hatred, and delusion. The 6 senses are burning with greed, hatred, and delusion. And these 6 senses have to be trained, disciplined. The discourse says, you read that, you can see it very clearly. Sabbang bhikkhave adittang. Kincha bhikkhave sabbang adittang. Chakkung bhikkhave adittang. Rupa aditta. Chakku viññānaṁ adittang. Chakku sampasso aditto. Yadidam chakku sampassa pacca uppajjati veditam sukham va dukkham va adukkam asukam va tampi adittang. Kena adittang ragagina, dosagina, mohagina adittang. Jatya jaraya maranena soke parideve dukke domanase upayase adittang ti vadami. That is the first paragraph. Now, here he mentioned 11 fires. 11 fires. Is that or not enough to burn us? This is the fire that will be extinguished when we practice metta. We will not be burned with these 11 fires when we practice metta. not outside fire. Outside fire will definitely burn us. Greed, hatred, and delusion are called fire, poison, and weapon. Greed is called ragaggi, dosaggi, mohaggi. Ragavisa, dosavisa, mohavisa. Raga satta, dosa satta, moha satta. These are the fire, poison, and weapon. Greed, hatred, and delusion are poison, weapon, and fire. Each of them. Greed is poison, weapon, and fire. Hatred is poison, fire, and weapon. Delusion is poison, fire, and weapon. When we practice metta, greed does not affect us. We will not be burned with that fire. We will not be affected by that poison. Greed is poison. That poisons the mind. Greed is weapon. That does not affect us when we practice metta. And therefore what Buddha said is always consistent with his teaching. He never says anything that inconsistent. When Samavati was dying with these 500 women, she was not affected by this fire. That is the time she said, sisters, this is the time to practice metta. Let the body be burnt, but don't let your mind be burned with your greed or hatred or delusion. Don't hate these people who set fire to this house, this building, where we are meditating. Don't have a scruple of hatred towards them. That is how, even at that moment, she was not affected by that fire. Outside fire burned the body, inside fire did not burn her mind. That is the most important message that we have to remember from the Metta and Sansa Sutta, the benefit of metta practice. And also, we have to protect our eyes from this fire. Eyes, we have to protect from this fire. Not to let these eyes be burned with the greed, hatred, and delusion arising by encountering visual objects. When we see visual objects, greed can arise. As I mentioned yesterday, greed is not in the visual outside object. Hatred is not in outside objects. Delusion is not in outside objects. They all are in us. Our eyes is an instrument. Objects are instruments. Objects are agents. Eyes are inner instrument. When these come together, consciousness arises. Then contact arises. Feeling arises. Along the feeling, greed can arise, hatred can arise, delusion can arise. If we dislike the object, hatred or anger, resentment can arise. If you like the object, greed can arise. If you are confused with the object, confusion can arise. This is why when Buddha was going to pass away, this very famous, almost all monks and Buddhist learned people know. When the Buddha was going to pass away, Venerable Ananda asked the Buddha, Venerable Sir, how can we behave towards women? Buddha said, don't look at them. Why? Are they ugly? No. Don't look at them. Venerable Sir, if you happen to see them accidentally, don't talk to them. Venerable Sir, if we happen to talk to them, don't speak more than 4 words. What are the 4 words? Dukkha, Samudaya, Nirodha, Magga. When I say you, I talk to you, or you. Dukkha, Samudaya, Nirodha, Magga. You never go wrong, I never go wrong. We can abide by the Buddha's teaching, following his teaching, in order to prevent our eyes generating fire, poison, and weapon, greed, hatred, and delusion. Buddha always had a wonderful ways of training us. And therefore this fire sermon, there is another fire sermon, which is more stark, very powerful. It delivers another message that is called similar of fire. Aggi Khandopama Sutta. This is Adittapariyaya Sutta. Aditta means burning. Aggi means fire. Both are called fire sermons, but that is simile of fire. This is burning with fire. Aditta, burning. We have to we focus our mind on this. Now there are 11 fires. We always talk about 11 fires. Ekulos ginna in Sinhalese. Ekadasa aggi. Ekadasa aggi. That is, you count here, you can see these 11. Greed, hatred, delusion, 3. Then birth, decay, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. 11 fires. So Buddha said, eyes, our eyes are burned with these 11 fires all the time. So Buddha delivered, Buddha helped us, taught us to extinguish this fire. Instead of not getting caught in the fire and burn, he taught us the way to extinguish this fire. Now let us take each of them in turn and try to understand these fires. He mentioned only eye. Since we have 6 senses, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. 6 senses. How our eyes are burned with fire. I said there is no fire outside that burns our mind through the eye. Through the eye, we burn our mind. Eyes themselves don't catch fire. Through the eyes, we burn our mind. Just open your eyes. You can see trillions of things outside. All are sometimes attractive. Some of them are attractive, some of them are not. And they are not, this attractiveness or distractiveness is not outside in the objects. But the way we look at them can generate greed, hatred, or delusion. The way we look at them. If we have trained our mind from childhood to generate greed when we look at objects, greed naturally arises. Nobody has to teach us to be greedy. We naturally become greedy. And if we keep looking at that object again and again and again and again, we condition our mind to be greedy. And day and night, we are burned with that. Thinking of greedy object. They can be sensual object, pleasure, kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha. Greedy for sensual pleasures, greedy for properties, birth, or greedy for not to be born. And they are always bombarding our mind through our sense eye. Yesterday we mentioned that outside objects don't have them. Similarly, hatred. Friends, you just have to take a newspaper, listen to a TV, listen to any media, any media. I mean, today it is worse. This is not started. This didn't start today. From time immemorial, whenever we expose to the external world, objects are there, and the senses and sensory objects come together. Consciousness arises, contact arises, feeling arises. As soon as this feeling arises, either greed, hatred, or delusion arise. That is why Buddha wanted us to train our senses to curtail, to reduce and minimize and eliminate these things. There are 3 levels. One level is anusaya level. Greed, hatred, delusion, any kind of defilement remains in anusaya. What is anusaya? Sleeping together. Anu, saya. Saya means sleeping with. meaning it is in deep down in our subconscious mind. It is there. As soon as an object senses, in this case, eye contact with an object, consciousness arises, then immediately contact arises, then immediately that anusaya stage become pariyuttana, gets up. Anusaya means dormant state, sleeping state, inactive state. Then something happens, the sleeping state become awakened state. It is not spiritually awakening, but these defilements that is lying in dormant state become active. That's called pariyuttana. Uttana means getting up. Then, if you are not mindful at that state, see, the Buddha's way is so perfect. If we remain mindful, we cannot become mindful of the anusaya state, but we can become mindful of pariyuttana state, arising state. If we take care of that greed or hatred or whatever at that level, then we can minimize its effect, reduce it, make it weak. If you are unmindful of that state, pariyuttana, then it becomes viti kama. Viti means the street, road. Kama means going. It comes from the root kamu, to go. Kamu, to go. It's an activate, it becomes even more active. If we take care of that state, then we can make it weak and get rid of it easily. If you are not mindful of that state, then it becomes kamma patha. Kamma patha. Going in the way of committing kamma. All happened in the mind. And therefore, that is chetana. That happens. We still have not expressed through our words and deeds. But in the case of hatred, now come to the powerful state, and we generate hate, dosa, raga dosa, resentment, anger. So we see an object, then this inner mechanism begin to operate. Inner mechanism begin to operate. Even if we don't utter a word, resentment, anger, dislike, keep propelling inside, working inside, eating us up. Anger eats us up, make us unhappy, and we burn. This is how we burn with the greed, raga, fire of greed. When we practice metta and we become mindful, metta also is called mindfulness. Remember when we practice metta, etam sating Adittapariyaya, this practice this mindfulness. What is this mindfulness? Metta is our mindfulness. We use it, we activate it to deal with that inner fire. seeing in a fire, he can get rid of it right then and there as it at all these levels, at least 3 levels. Pariyutta level, Vitikama level, Pata level. If we don't take care of that, then it keeps eating us up and reduce us to ashes, spiritually speaking. So Buddha says, I are burning with these things because eye contact is burning. You see, eye is burning, sights are burning. When we say when Buddha says sights are burning, when we look at the object, we don't burn the sight, the object. Our eyes don't burn the object. Like according to Hindu mythology, Ishvara could do that. Ishvara had a third eye. When he focused the third eye on an object, it is like a laser beam. The object will reduce to ashes. That is according to Hindu mythology. Buddha did not contribute to that. Buddha did not accept that. Buddha did not mean when he said this, that we can burn outside object. But depending on outside object, sights are burning. This is actually metaphorical. Not our eyes can burn outside object, but because of the outside object, our mind can be burned with these 11 fires. Not only one fire, we have 11 of them to reduce us to ashes. 11 fires. Then eye consciousness is burning. Eye consciousness is burning. Sight burns our mind. Eye consciousness is burning our mind. Consciousness is a part of the mind. And that consciousness itself will be so charged with anger or hatred that can burn the mind. Then eye contact, consciousness and eye contact. That is why Buddha said to Ananda, don't look at women. We have eye contact. When you keep looking at a woman, a man can generate greed. If a woman look at a man, greed can generate in her mind. Not because women are ugly, but because they're beautiful. Women are beautiful. Naham bhikkhu anyang egarupampi samanupassamiyang phusasa kittam paryadaya tittati yataidang ittirupam. Buddha said in Anguttara Nikaya, Etathagapali, because I don't see any other object, any other sight that captured the attention of a man other than a woman's figure. Woman's figure captured the attention of the man's mind, not because she is ugly, because she is beautiful in the eyes of the man. And Buddha said the same thing about women. Naham bhikkhu anyang egarupam rupam samansvamai yadaitam purusha rupam ityachit tang paryada tittati. So contact is, in psychology, eye contact is extremely important. When I give a talk, my eye contact with the audience is very important for me because otherwise I cannot talk. I have to see the faces of everybody and see their reaction. If they're sleepy, if they look here and there, I don't feel like talking. When I see them paying attention, I get stimulated. I can talk. There is some psychological benefit of contact, but for the spiritual development, for training the mind to become calm and relaxed and peaceful, eye contact is very dangerous. Buddha knew this both on the material, psychological effect of eye contact and spiritually, non-material effect of eye contact. Buddha knew this. And therefore, when we have contact, if we are ordinarily, we are not mindful. Of course, if an enlightened person has any contact with eye, will not have this kind of effect. Any unenlightened person will be affected by eye contact. Same thing, I mention only eye, same thing goes with ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. When we explain one, we can understand the other by this first example. Then, pleasant, painful, or neutral feeling that arises depending on eye contact. Those two are burning. What arises through the eye contact, pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling arises. That also burns. They are burning with fire of passion, fire of ill will, fire of delusion. Okay, we understand that. I declare. And he says, fire of burning, fire of birth. Eyes are burning with the fire of birth. Eyes pass away and take birth every fraction of a second, every moment by itself. But with the external objects, they are born and die with greed, hatred, and delusion, so on. And therefore, aging, death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair all entail. All happens after that. And therefore, this discourse is very important for us to remember. Now, let us go into some little more detail. I broke them down. So Buddha said, the sights are burning, Our eyes burn us more than anything else. The sight of, I said, a woman, similarly, there is one thing that takes hold of woman's mind more than any other, that is man. It does not matter how well educated, religious, or civilized you are. This fact is part of our DNA. It is driven by evolution. In the evolutionary process, this is already built into our system. Those who are visually attractive to others of opposite sex are more likely to pass on their genes to other next generation. It goes from generation to generation. It doesn't stop at one generation. We all know to fuel this fire, the way how we add more fuel to this fire, we have all kind of fashions, cosmetic industry, entertainments, advertisements, every other retail business use this natural attraction between the opposite sex. Not only that, but product design and then packaging and even the staff hired to sell it have to be attractive. You know, when somebody, a salesperson in a show, in shopping malls, they have to dress up in an attractive way in order to attract customers. And the way they display objects. Objects are displayed in such a way that you cannot take your eyes away from those objects, because each object appears to be, made appear to be beautiful and attractive. So you have temptation in the object that displayed in various places. Since everybody walking around is not mindful, and then it is possible for them to be tempted by the object displayed in certain places. And so somebody asked me, when you go somewhere, music is going on. As a monk or one who observed 8 precepts, does he break his precept when he listens to this music? We are not walking around listening to music, but it bombards our minds, our ears. They play this music not only for me, they play this music. And we hear this music. Why do they do that? Not to break our precept, but to attract people. Or when you telephone, somebody would say, push this button, push this button, push this button, push this button, push this button. If you don't push the button, you hear music. Until you get tired of holding the phone, they play music. Why is that? To keep paying attention to their message. So there is no way to escape this bombardment of your senses with all these outside things. And therefore, we have to be very mindful not to be burned with this sound, not only sight, even the sound. They are always there. So, smell, taste. If you go to a shopping mall, there are all kind of perfumes all around. And sometimes we are allergic to it. And they don't care, but the intention is to attract people. So the burning objects or object that can burn our senses, burn our mind through our senses, are always there, nose. And the taste, when we think of one, we think that is worse than the other, but every senses, every sense or every object that we are exposed to is burning. We burn our tongue tasting all sort of things under the sun. We increase our greed. And therefore, this Adittapariyaya Sutta, this discourse, it covers, we thought yesterday discourse we say is the summary of the entire teaching of the Buddha. Even this discourse is the summary of the entire teaching of the Buddha. So we have to be very careful about this, using our senses and expose them to sensory objects to train our mind. Be mindful. The message is, we remain mindful in spite of all these things. Train our mind to be mindful and see all of them, everyone, without any exception, is impermanent. Everything is impermanent. We keep that in mind and get along with whatever is there without getting caught in this fire. I think this may be enough for this morning's Dhamma talk. And you heard the gong?
Not yet.
Yeah? Not yet. It is Buddha time. And this afternoon, I will not be participating in the afternoon session. I think